I'm Lloyd Holiday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. So what happened to that great standard of living that we used to enjoy here in America in the 1960s and even into the 1970s? Well, that's what the Cost of a Thing podcast is all about, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here. Okay, today is going to be a short podcast on medical insurance. It is my number 2 of my top 10 super ripoffs. There's my list of my top 10 super ripoffs right up on the screen there. You can see medical is number 2. That's the medical super ripoff. And that's one reason why our standard of living is much lower today than it was back in the 1960s and 70s. And specifically today, I want to just talk about how much my insurance cost and what kind of level of insurance, medical insurance I had 25, 30 years ago at my job versus the level that I have today, and what I paid for it back then versus what I paid for it today. And I want to do this especially for the younger people. If there's some young people who are listening to this who weren't here, if you're under 20 or 30 or even 40, you didn't have medical insurance in the year 2000 except on your parents' plan. And you probably weren't paying attention to that. I want to let you know, especially for the younger people, what's happened to the medical insurance prices and situation. Okay, and every job I ever had up to about 20 years ago, up to about the year 2000, covered my medical insurance completely. I didn't have to pay anything out of my pocket. The company paid for the whole thing. It was one of my benefits, and it was good coverage. Call it now Cadillac Medical. Okay, those are very expensive today. Back then, up to about the year 2000, my employer, picked up the whole amount. I didn't have to pay anything. I didn't have to pay any copays when I went to the doctor. There were no deductibles. They paid everything. Now, after about the year 2000, they started to tighten the screws on the employee and me. They started to ask me to pay a part of my medical insurance cost. And at first it wasn't very much, a few dollars per month. And at the same time they asked me to pay a portion of my medical insurance premiums. They started to add on things like copays. So if I went to the doctor, I would have to pay a certain fee to the doctor. And these were gradually added in over the years after about year 2000. Then they started to add deductibles, and those were added in around that same time too. So those are the 3 things they've done. They've made the employee now pay part of their premium, and it's getting to be a large part of the premium. And copays, which steadily have been rising. The copays are getting bigger every year, and the deductibles are getting bigger every year. So those are the 3 ways that they raised my cost of medical insurance. And to offset some of this, the companies have been offering lower level health plans. The lower the cost to the employee for the premiums, the higher the deductibles and the higher the copays are. So I'll tell you, what I did is I took one of those lower level health plans so that the amount that the company paid would cover my plan. And there's still a little bit of premium out of pocket for me, and of course the large copays, the large deductibles, but I don't have to pay much out of pocket for it, maybe $100 a month, even now. But my plan, let me tell you about my plan that I have now. It's no longer the Cadillac plan that covered everything, of course. It's a pretty lousy plan. It's basically a catastrophic medical insurance plan, which includes a $5,000 deductible per person in my family, plus very large copays. So it's a pretty lousy plan, basically a catastrophic plan. If I ring up really huge medical bills, that would then kick in after that big deductible. And like I said, that's what they call a catastrophic medical insurance plan, because it basically just covers you if you have something really big and a catastrophe happen, a health catastrophe in your family. So that's what happened to me over the last 20 years or so. I can only imagine how that's going to be in the next 20 years, how bad it'll be 20 years from now. And here's the kicker in all of this. Plan that I had, they still offer that plan at my employer, but that plan would now cost me $20,000 a year out of pocket to pay for the premiums. That's just the premiums. Now, there's probably no deductibles on that or copays. I think it's the same plan I had before, the Cadillac plan. That's it. But it would cost me $20,000, a plan I used to get as a free benefit from my employer. Now, in the last 20 years, has gone up to $20,000. So I'd have to pay that on my paycheck if I wanted that expensive health plan. So in effect, my income has gone down $20,000 per year with respect to medical insurance. I mean, that's how much I'd have to pay out of my pocket to get that plan I used to have for free. And that's the terrible thing, and that's a reduction in standard of living, because I used to get that great plan. Now my work is worth less, right? I have to pay $20,000 to get the plan that my work just used to cover on its own. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up, and you can see right there that is the incredible shrinking dollar when it comes to medical costs, as is shown very clearly there in my own health coverage from my employer over the last 20 years or so. What I used to get as a benefit from my company now would cost me $20,000 a year for that same coverage I got for just my work before. And that shows you how medical insurance ripoff has lowered our standard of living. You either get a lesser plan and hope you don't get sick, or you pay that $20,000 a year to get that same plan that was offered for free 20 years ago. And if you want to listen to some more about the medical ripoff, this medical super ripoff, my number 2 super ripoff on my list there, you can go and listen to that podcast, learn more about it, why it happened, what it is, why we're paying so much for medical today. Thank you for listening in today, and until next time, this is Lloyd Holiday signing off.